morning, friends. Today's topic is a great Theosophist, and today we're going to examine the life of Nagasena. We decided to look at this student today because it's related to last week's talk on Ashoka and the spread of not just Buddhism on the outer plane, but the theosophical message, the message of the masters on the inner plane that is underlying a lot of these great teachers. So when Ashoka passed away, the rule of Dharma Rajya, passed quickly from Mauryan rule. And the Mauryans were some princes that ruled part of India. So the descendants of Ashoka managed to retain the throne for another half century or so. And about this time, the Bactrian Greeks made their way to India. And India at this time was bigger than we see it today on the map, encompassed parts of Pakistan, Afghanistan. India was much larger than than we see it today. So along the succession of these Greek kings was one monarch called Menander to the west. And his, in Buddhism, they call him Milinda. And it's where these two cultures come together that we see this great teacher Nagasena appear, and there is a transmission of Eastern thought to the West. So the Brahmanical religion was still high at this time. Buddhism was still spreading. Ashoka was, set up these laws, these edicts all around, and sent out teachers to spread the ideals of, nonviolence and right living, and basically the Noble Eightfold Path. So Menander was admired by both his Greek subjects and his Indian subjects because he had military genius, he governed fairly, and he was even-handed in support of Greek, Buddhist, Hindu, and Zoroastrian traditions. He preserved economic prosperity, and he was devoted to the life of the mind. He was known to the Greeks as Basileus, and the Indians called him Maharaja. He was called King of Justice. His government was like Hellenistic in structure, and he increased the prominence of many Greek cities found by Alexander the Great, but he also ensured that the old Indian cities were given attention. He didn't let the far reaches of his rule, the far territories, languish in any way. He was known for debating and, as it was said, the life of the mind. And Menander met Nagasena, and they had these debates. And it was through these debates that convinced him, Menander, to join the Sangha, or the Buddhist tradition of the brotherhood of priests and practitioners of Buddhism. And it seems to this student that it must have been important for this to happen because of the transmission of Eastern thought to the West, that over history we can see progressively this message keeps coming to the West, and Madame Blavatsky and William Q. Judge in the 1800s were one transmission of that. We can look to the Rosicrucian movement, we can look to Tsongkhapa in the 1300s. But this is in before the Christian era, so this is very early. This is like 300s or something BC. So Menander eventually renounced his kingdom to his son, and he was turned over to the Buddhist thought and joined a monastic community, and it's said that he died as an arhat. And I have the glossary handy to more or less handy. That's not in here. Well, I'll be keeping this out in a minute. Well, an arhat is someone who was more or less learning the inner teachings of this message. There's always that which is transmitted among the public, and that through meditation and the inner this realization of the inner ideals. And it said he reached nirvana. Plutarch said that Menander died in a war, but both the Greek, the Buddhist, and the Indian agree that he became a Buddhist. And near the end of his reign, he sent a delegation of monks from Alexandria, his birthplace, to attend the consecration of a great stupa in Ceylon, India, in Sri Lanka. So we can see that there's this back and forth, dissemination. The debate in which Nagasena and Menander converse has been written down, and it's called the Milinda Panda. So it's a series of debates and discussions, and it's still in existence today. Now, Nagasena was a disciple of a Dharmarakshita, who was a Greek disciple dispatched by Ashoka. So again, there's this connection from last week's talk of Ashoka and how these ideas are going back and forth. Only Nagasena was able to banish Menander's doubts and win him over to the Sangha. But Nagasena was no ordinary monk. It said he had been called from transcendental realms to perform this task. So this suggests that there must have been a very, important reason for a being from the celestial transcendental realms to incarnate for the purposes of convincing Menander to and to clear up his thoughts and to transmit this idea. Probably because there's this, exchange of Eastern and Western thought and ideals. So according to legend, there are some arhats who were aware of this. They were on Mount Yugandhara, and they were trying to figure out who would be able to match wits with Menander, because he had a great mind and he was a great debater, and they all demurred. So they proposed to prevail upon the god Mahensa, which is spelled or Mahasena, I think it is. Yeah, Mahasena, almost same as Nagasena, but Mahasena. And by meditation, they vanished from the mountain and appeared in the celestial realm. The king of the gods conveyed them to Mahasena's dwelling. Although initially he resisted the request to incarnate in human form, he agreed to do so when it became clear that the principles of religion would be furthered through his bodhisattvic sacrifice. When the Arhats returned to their Himalayan abode, they chose one of their number, Rohana, who had been lost in meditation and unaware of the crisis, to act as their agent amongst men. So not only did the Arhats send an agent, but Mahensa incarnates as Nagasena. And what that is really an avatar. The appearance. So I'm just gonna read real quick what an avatar is. An avatar is a divine incarnation, the descent of a god or some exalted being who has progressed beyond the necessity of rebirths into the body of a simple mortal. Krishna was an avatar of Vishnu. There are two kinds of avatars, those born from woman and the parentless, the Anupadaka. In this case, there was a Brahmin, Sanutara, and his wife conceived a child. The god Mahasena was born as the boy Nagasena 10 lunar months later. As Nagasena is being raised in his very early years, each day for 7 years and 10 months, Rohana, who is the agent of the Arhats, to appear on the scene to record the transmission. Rohana, the one who was lost in meditation, ends up and wasn't aware of the crisis, ends up having to serve a penance. So Rohana is the being who, as a beggar, begged for food at the home of Nagasena every day for 7 years and 10 months, only to be turned away. Finally, the family relented, not knowing that doing so brought an end to his penance for being lost in meditation when the crisis had to be met. And therefore, the monk, Rohana, received a portion of food each day. At exactly this time, Nagasena reached the age of 7 and began to study the 3 Vedas. He penetrated their arcane meanings almost upon hearing them. He mastered them and then turned to meditation. When he discovered he had not found the root of reality in his knowledge, Rohana felt in his mind what was passing in the heart of Nagasena. So Rohana met Nagasena and promised him the secret of reality. Once Nagasena obtained his parents' consent, Rohana became his teacher and entered him into the Sangha. He deliberately set the discourses aside and took up the Abhidhamma, the deeper meanings of the faith, or sometimes called Abhidharma. So he immediately the teacher knew his student what was passing in his mind and set aside the outer stuff and focused on the deeper. The Abhidharma is the metaphysical third part of the Tripitaka, a very philosophical Buddhist work. So they dove right into the deeper stuff. When Nagasena mastered it in 7 months, I lost my place, hang on. He mastered it in 7 months. He was admitted in full membership into the Sangha. But Nagasena doubted the wisdom of his teacher in Rohana, and Rohana picked up this thought and sent a sort of a rebuke back to Nagasena. He asked for his forgiveness, but his teacher withheld it. Instead, he sent Nagasena to another teacher for further instruction. And then they test him and instruct him more in the Abhidharma. Both he and his hearers attained insight as he taught, as the teacher taught Nagasena, being in the presence of a great teacher and an avatar. I guess it affected those present, and at that time his teacher knew it was time for him to fulfill his destiny. So he was sent to Ashoka Park to meet the disciple Dharma Rakshata that Ashoka had sent. He taught Nagasena the inner and the outer meanings of the three baskets of the Buddha's teaching, the Tripitaka, in 6 months. The last night of this period witnessed Nagasena's enlightenment, and the earth thundered joyously, while the heavens rained sandal dust and flowers upon the new Arhat. Immediately the Arhats of the Himalayas summoned Nagasena, who vanished from Ashoka Park and appeared before them. They asked him to face Menander and to debate with him. So they all set out from the Himalayan heights to meet him. Soon Menandros sent word that he would visit the grove and debate with Nagasena. When Menander arrived, he immediately recognized Nagasena by his supreme, serene confidence. He writes, "At the sight of Nagasena, wise and pure, subdued in all that is the best subjection, Milinda uttered his foreboding word. Many talkers I have visited, many the conversations I have had, but never yet till now, today, has fear so strange, so terrible, overpowered my heart. It is said of Nagasena he was learned with varied eloquence, sagacious, bold, master of views, in exposition sound. The brethren, wise themselves in holy writ, repeaters of the fivefold sacred word, put Nagasena as their leader and their chief, him Nagasena of clear mind and wisdom deep, who knew which was the right path and which the false, and had himself attained nirvana's heights." So thus began the debates. But Menander, you could tell that he felt like he had a premonition that he'd met his match. And since he took his philosophical discussions seriously, he sensed that he would be compelled to accept Nagasena's conclusions and that a change of heart would alter his life. As soon as the salutations had been exchanged, Menander asked how it was, how the elder was known, and he said, "I am known as Nagasena, O king, yet this is only a generally understood term, a designation in common use, for there is no permanent individuality involved in the matter." So in other words, he's saying, I'm not a personality. He realizes, he's communicating that he understands he is one with all. And this brought a flood of questions from Menander. Such questions as, who is it who lives a life of righteousness? Who is it who devotes himself to meditation? Who is it who attains the goal of the excellent way to the nirvana of the Arhat? Who is it who destroys living creatures? Who is it who takes what is not his own? And he goes on and on with all these questions, and thus began a discussion which covered every aspect of Buddhist teaching, with rich examples and insights. And that's why it was recorded in this book. And it is still around today and mostly reflects the Southern Buddhist school. So this was a historical event, yet the dialectics, the discussion, are about eternal truths. Nagasena asked Menander, "If the axle or the pole The wheels or the frame, the ropes or the yoke was the king's chariot? He answered that it was none of these things, nor all of them together. It is on account of having all these things that it comes under the generally understood term of chariot. Just so, Nagasena explained, do I come under the generally understood term of Nagasena. So he was trying to express the idea that an individual is just a temporary matrix of skandhas, which are tendencies from past lives. And since Nagasena had realized his oneness with all, he was not an individuality. He was under the generally understood term of Nagasena. So he's never even referring to himself as going through the metaphysical difference between general and proper nouns. In an attempt to show that everything depends on something else for existence. And this is where we come into the idea of cause and effect and nidana. Nidanas, I'll share this with everybody. It's from the Secret Doctrine, and there are 12 nidanas or causes of being, and each is the effect of a previous cause, and a cause in turn to its successor, the sum total being based on the four truths. The 12 nidanas belong to a theory of the stream of catenated law, which produces merit and demerit, and finally brings karma into full sway. So this mentions how Maya or illusion is an element which enters into all finite things. In other words, the personality. For everything that exists has only a relative, not an absolute reality, since the appearance which the hidden noumenon assumes for any observer depends upon his power of cognition, that which he can take into view. And sometimes as a personality, we take in a smaller portion than if our consciousness is universal and we can take in the fullness of it. Nothing is permanent except the one hidden absolute existence, which contains in itself the noumena of all realities. So these existences belong to every plane up to the highest Dian Chohans, and are in degree sort of like shadows as we enter into material existence and successive causes. And just another note, the causes of existence mean not only physical ones, but metaphysical ones. The chief of which is the desire to exist, an outcome of nidana and maya. In other words, as a result of these concatenated series of causes and effects and illusion playing within that field. So Menander says, let our discussion be about the truth. And then they talk about the other qualities, the paramitas, shila, good conduct towards others, shraddha, faith, perseverance, virya, meditation, samadhi, mindfulness. And Nagasena quotes Buddha to show that shila, or right harmony in word and act towards others, is the basis of the whole path. He says, virtue's the base on which the man who's wise can train his heart and make his wisdom grow. Thus shall the strenuous bhikkhu or disciple, undeceived, unravel the tangled skein of life. And then they talk about how when wisdom springs up, it dispels the darkness of ignorance, It causes the radiance of knowledge to arise. It brings forth the light of intelligence. It makes the Four Noble Truths plain for one to understand. In the 12 Nidanas, it's by reason of ignorance that come the skandhas and the samskaras, the forces or potentiality. And it's by reason of that, the consciousness, that comes name and form and identification with name and form. And through name and form comes the senses, by reason of contact with the outer world. And by reason of contact comes thirst. And then we see how this dependent chain of origination, the Nidanas, comes about. And then birth into a body, old age, illness, death, grief, despair, lamentation. And it becomes this circular chain of cause and effect, and that's what the message of all the great teachers through time has been, is that we are all one, and it is possible to break this cycle of dependent origination. There is no apparent beginning or ending to the sequence, as each universe is a result of the one previous to it. Each cycle, each manvantara is based on the one previous. Each of our lives are based on the one previous. And it's impossible to find the beginning because it's in the causeless cause. But to understand it, to break that chain, we have to appeal to the ground on which it all arises, and that is enlightenment. There's more. They have more discussion, and on one occasion, Menander confronted Nagasena with a text from one of the Jataka tales, the stories of Buddha's life, which enjoined nonviolence, and another text which said, "Punish him who deserves punishment. Favor him who is worthy of favor." And Nagasena patiently explains that nonviolence is derived from the nature of law, dharma itself. But the other passage had a specific application. And so he helps Menandros sift through all his questions and all the thoughts that need to be put in the proper place so that the right emphasis is on in the right place. In other words, one can go so far on one's own, but at some point when the student is ready, the teacher appears and dispels doubts and answers the questions of the student. Menander was troubled by some of the emphasis on the feeling of love for all beings, because he could think of numerous instances where love had resulted in tragedy for either the lover or the beloved. But Nagasena explains that love which was focused on an object could result in a variety of consequences, good, bad, or indifferent. But that love without an object, universal love, is not the attribute of any individual. Nagasena says the virtues of love are not attached to the personality of the one who loves, but to the actual presence of the love that one has invoked in his heart. At the moment in which an individual has realized this sense of love, neither fire nor poison nor sword can do him harm. Menander proposed 82 dilemmas to Nagasena, who responded to each of them to his satisfaction. No longer did Menander wish to debate for the sake of debating, for argument's sake, nor to test Nagasena's skill in his knowledge. He wished to learn from a teacher whose wisdom to him was proven. and his questions became those of a disciple who was now open and receptive to this wisdom and this understanding. Nagasena gives an elaborate metaphor for the Buddha's city of righteousness, which is another word for like the Sangha, all the disciples who are sharing this experience of learning it. And he says, this is an interesting metaphor, the Blessed Ones, the Buddha's city of righteousness, O king, has righteousness for its rampart, fear of wrongdoing for its moat, knowledge for its battlement, zeal for its watchtower, faith for its pillars, mindfulness for the watchman at the gate, wisdom for the terrace above, the sutantas for its marketplace, the sutras, the abhidharma, the rule of law, for its crossways, the vinaya, law, for its judgment hall, and constant self-possession for its chief street. Its flower bazaar consists of subjects for meditation, and its perfume bazaar is the virtues. Its fruit bazaar is composed of the results of each stage of its path, while its antidote bazaar contains the medicaments of the Four Noble Truths. Its medicine bazaar holds the means of mindfulness and the powers of morality and wisdom. Its ambrosia bazaar is meditation upon the real, with a capital R. Its jewel bazaar contains the 7 priceless gems of right conduct, meditation, knowledge, emancipation, insight, discrimination, and the 7-fold wisdom of the Arhats. This city can be seen by those who have cultivated eyes to see. It is both a foundation of the Sangha and proof of the reality of the Buddha. So having shown the nature and meaning of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, Nagasena offered 105 similes of the ideal monk and arhat. For example, I won't read them all. The bhikshu, the disciple, should be like the earth in remaining the same, being self-perfumed, standing firm, never wearying, and being free from ill will towards others. Like water, he should be pure, refreshing, free from offense, much desired by the world and harmless. Like fire, he should burn away anything unnecessary and undesirable. Show no pity towards his inclinations, light up his heart into a purifying blaze, benefit all beings, and dispel darkness. And he goes on, like the wind, he should penetrate the groves of meditation, bend everything before his examination, be above all earthly concerns, bear good qualities along with himself, and yet remain homeless in the world. Just as space cannot be grasped, so too the bhikshu should elude the grasp of every desire. Like space, the effort of the bhikshu should know no limit, and like space, he should depend on nothing outside himself. According to the Milinda Panha, oh, that's an H. Panha. I think it depends on the translation. Menander asked Nagasena 304 different questions, which resulted in his complete acceptance of the teachings of the Buddha. He ruled with a wisdom and a detachment that earned him a unique place in Greek and Indian history. And it said he renounced his kingdom eventually gave it to his son, and entered as a monk at the end of his life. Nothing is known of Nagasena after his lengthy encounter with the king. This seems altogether appropriate, for he had been called into mortal existence for the sake of the Dharma, the rule of law, and having performed his task, he vanished from history. He left behind a method of explicating the teachings of the Buddha, which became an archetype for subsequent teachers. He had a subtle blend of metaphysics and ethics, argument and example, and he gave the model of useful discourse and an encouragement to practice. So this discussion, the Milinda Panha, is revered by both the northern and southern Buddhist schools alike. It depicts the path and the goal, and above all, a portrait of the Arhat. So if there's any questions, and furthermore, I have more information on what are some of the 12 nidanas, the chain of dependent origination and the causes.
Is he the same Melander that was Simon Magus's student?
This student did find something about that. I'm trying to remember. I don't think the timing's the same. Yeah, I think he was much earlier, but they had the same name. But if one could see on the inner planes and see the births of another being, or know the previous births of oneself, it's entirely, possible. I think they just had the same name, however.
Yeah, you mentioned the word skandhas along the way there, and you're talking of the Buddhist tradition there, it sounds like. But in looking at the literature, there's one item here. I'm going to read it because let's see, Buddhism rejects reincarnation as taught in Theosophy and says that the man in dying is annihilated, but throws off skandhas, which later on coalesce in the form of a new man, which begs the question of what our essence is, which as we come into existence, the way this student understands it, then we fall into error, etc. But that pure essence, the monad, continues on from throughout eternity. That's this student's understanding of Theosophy. But in reading this, it seems like there is that difference between popular Buddhism, if you will, and Theosophy. Typically, when I try to tell people what Theosophy is, they say, hey, it sounds like Buddhism. So I thought I'd just maybe throw that out.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. It's not the same. There's always the external teaching that is spread, and then among those who fit themselves to become the better able to help and teach others and desire to live the life and spread the light, and when they're ready a teacher appears, the inner message is also transmitted. And Madame Blavatsky has many articles about Theosophy is not Buddhism. But the point of talking about Nagasena is that he is a great Theosophist, whether he appeared under the time and the place and the region that expressed it through Buddhism, or through Zoroastrianism, or through Zen, or through Christianity, that he still was and represents a true Theosophist. What people who have studied his discourses have written about him, he didn't write anything. It was all recorded, and yeah, eventually all the great teachers' messages become corrupted through translation, through use and misuse, and it's become part of the Buddhist canon of literature. But nonetheless, like Krishna's in the Bhagavad Gita, there's many interpretations, and one has to use as much penetrating insight, take all what one knows to something like that. This student believes he's in the spirit of what Madame Blavatsky talks about as all these great teachers of humanity. But it did seem like, according to this article, he had a particular purpose, and we may not know that greater purpose. This student only conjectures that it was that spreading from east to west, the thought of nonviolence, the thought of breaking the cycle of rebirths of awareness of a greater universe.
In your reading in the Theosophical Glossary of Avatar, and you mentioned that there were two sorts of birth, the one that's coming through a woman, and then
Yeah, that was Nagasena.
right, and then the other one, the appearance of I guess a fully grown individual, the illusion. Now, like how the passage was read in the Gita about being incarnation of Krishna, something like that. It would seem like the one coming through the woman, that's more timely and according with cycles, but to appear full grown on the scene sort of indicates that this is an emergency. This is, I don't have time in a sense to go through the birth, the growing up. So this student indicates that there is an urgency, there's something big about to go on, or is needed more so in time of growth and learning, how you mentioned that the Nagasena did. Now, I have heard that, I think in the case of Kapila or one of the Hindu, they appeared fully grown on the scene, something like that. So just toss that.
Yeah, but it was also interesting to show that even as a child at 7 years old, he mastered the material in such a short time and moved on very quickly from tradition to tradition, learning as much as he could, and within 6 months of meeting his teacher, he achieved enlightenment. So it shows that he's setting an example, but it's way more accelerated than the path most of us are treading. But it can still be timely. I mean, he was still, born. I mean, it seems like he may have met the King Menander as a child, as a very young adult. That age is really an illusion. The age and wisdom. We can't assume anything. Yes?
But in your explanation of Menander to this student, it became very apparent what HPV also had said, that we need not become narrow in accepting everything that is given to us, that the teacher's message is based on very general principles. As she went all over the world and gathered that information to bring out these books, she says what the student has to do is ask questions, and Menander did not accept what Nagasena was
right
telling
off.
him. And this is a very good example of that exemplification of becoming wiser in understanding and enlarging your scope by asking spiritual questions. And I think that was a very second example of that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The skandhas, or the bundles of attributes, Madame Blavatsky says in the glossary, are everything finite. There are 5, esoterically, 7 attributes in every living human being, and these are form, perception, consciousness, action, and knowledge. And these unite at the birth of the man and constitute his personality. After the maturity of these skandhas, they begin to separate and weaken. And this is followed by, she says, jara marana, or decrepitude and death. So it seems that the impetus that are put into the skandhas, they do coalesce and cause the birth attached to the being, but that they do, the energy behind them runs out, they start to disperse, and that's when the natural death of the human being comes about. So form.
But could it not be possible also that we spend some of the energy in them, and since we produce new causes, then we actually create new skandhas for the next life, don't we not?
We do, until we learn how to break that cycle. And that's one of the reasons Madame Blavatsky shouldn't talk about it a lot, but it's in the Secret Doctrine, the Nidanas, the 12 concatenated causes of existence, action, and knowledge.
I have a question
Mm-hmm.
concerning individuality. Nagasawa's response to the king there, when he was saying, I'm like the all, like that. Now, in that state, is individuality lost? Because now, at one level, the acquirement in the life cycle, Manvantra to Manvantra, is the acquirement of this individuality, and they state that some kind of way, even though one goes to these higher states like samadhi, nirvana, things like that, one maintains that sense of individuality. So when, I guess the question becomes, now when the individual connects with the all, is that sense of individuality annihilated and then one is all, or the illusion of the individuality thing again?
So your question is, what happens to individuality when a being becomes one with the all?
Yeah.
Good question.
Read the voice of the silence.
That's what a lot of the literature here is about. But a short answer, it seems that perhaps one's individuality is expanded, but at the same time, it becomes a cipher, a negative. It's no longer I and other. That individuality is universal. That, like Krishna said, he says to Arjuna, you and I have been through many births. You know yours. You don't know yours, but I know mine. So he knows when these principles have been brought together to act as an individuality, even though there isn't technically one present.
So then there's a follow-up quickly. So samadhi, nirvana, turiya, these higher states of consciousness, they're then not necessarily connected with the all, that they're lesser, one could say?
This student doesn't know whether samadhi, nirvana are completely synonymous. I mean, there is a lot in the Secret Doctrine about nirvana and maya, about the truth and the illusion, the reality and the illusion. Yes?
I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up on that conversation, I don't know if I can help any more in the definition, but in nirvana, that's the state where, the spiritual state, if you will, and as we evolve into, this is the maya part of the skandhas is what we see, is the personalities when we see each other on this plane, on the physical plane of existence, and that's when the imperfection comes in. But this student's understanding anyway, that on that spiritual plane, the monad, if you will, that's the part of us that we have perfected and carried from life to life, and maybe parts of us, I'm just asking you a question now, as a monad, we have different parts that are perfected, if you will, that we carry from life to life until we get all parts perfected.
Until we're aware of, till our consciousness is on the same plane, because for every state of consciousness there is a corresponding state of matter, and it becomes a subjective objective thing. On this plane these things are objective to us, but on a higher plane other ideas or other states would become objective, and there is a ladder. It's just the highest levels are so subtle and so difficult to use words for, that we have these terms like nirvana and samadhi, but it's difficult for us to understand. But yes, we are eternal. Matter is eternal. Consciousness is eternal. It has no beginning and no end.
I picked up a different interesting thread that was very interesting of Mendelsohn speaking of love. That love, if it is attached to an object, it is a cause of pain and disappointment and loss. But when it is detached from object and state of being, then that's where you're aiming for. But then, in a way, when we apply it to ourselves, I was thinking that it is not more than an instrument of growth. Because you have to experience that to grow beyond your self-centeredness. But I would be very cautious if somebody who is still growing would say, I'm experiencing this overall state of love, I love everyone, but no one in particular. Because to me it's almost a state of self-perfection. And while we're still growing here, we're not perfect, so it's in a way better to admit I'm attached to an object and I am mistaken and in pain, rather than to say, I'm just in a state of love, but I'm not sure whom I love.
Yeah, it's good to acknowledge where you're at. It has to be, one has to take a stand and look within and take stock of where one is and where one wants to go. So
it's like one indicator that you've reached it, when you can have that state towards everyone in a
and
sincere way.
everything as much as you would, or more probably, than we love ourselves or anybody else. So the ultimate cause that from the nidanas is the adi nidana. Adi meaning beyond, and the adi nidana is the first and supreme causality. From adi, the first, and nidana, the principal cause. So we could say that it's like saying the causeless cause. And then our time is up, but we can talk more about the nidanas. There's some Sanskrit terms, there's some lists of them, and how they bring about karma. So,
Make a comment about love. This is student was doing the same research, but the thing that came to this student's forefront was that kind of love, which is unattached, has no expectations in return. So that is a very different thing, because when two people are interacting with one another, this binding force is there. We expect things from the ones that we love, and there should be no such attachment of any kind.
Conditional love.
That's
Yes.
right.
Everyone wants and everyone strives, but
Yeah.
no one can get there because we have self.
But if you truly love someone, you give without any question, no expectation of any kind, because the inner core, or each one of us, is an expression of that which innately is love and harmony, which you said called Sheila.
so it's a good point. We can love another individual on many different levels. It's not just
But,
this or that kind of love.
A simple question in short sentence now, what is love?
Now we're cutting to the core.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason why I ask, because I was speaking with a Jesuit one time, and he said, oh, it's impossible to love everyone. So, coming back to the simple definition of love.
Well, I think these great teachers would stand as real examples that it is, of course, possible. Not only possible, but necessary. So next week is Gleanings from Forum Answers, and we will be following this discussion with the study class in the Gita. If you'd like to see our website, it's www.ultdc.org. Thank you.